Welcome to the Indiana Athletic Trainers Association podcast. The IATA is dedicated to advancing the profession of athletic training and empowering membership through advocacy, education, networking, and innovative resources. To find out more about the IATA, check out our website and social media pages. The views and opinions expressed by speakers, guests, or others who have provided materials to and for this podcast are not necessarily those of the IATA. The IATA assumes no responsibility for, nor endorses any of the comments, recommendations, or materials that are provided. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the IATA podcast. I'm really excited about this episode, and we're going to be talking some legislative actions and things happening at the statehouse currently with the 2025 Indiana General Assembly. And I am excited to have Lucas Dargo on this episode. Welcome, Lucas.
Thank you so much for having me, Daniel. I really appreciate this opportunity to talk to you and the membership.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you're here. And as we do with every podcast, pretty much every podcast you ever listen to, it's always we got to have the guest introduce themselves. And so, Lucas, tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're working, and then obviously roll into your role with the IATA.
Sure. So I am the program director of the Master of Athletic Training program at Manchester University, and I've been in that role for the last 5 years and been at Manchester for a total of 7 years. Before coming into academia, I have been a high school teacher and an athletic trainer in Southern Indiana, and then I also have been an industrial athletic trainer for a couple of years. So I've worked in a variety of different settings, and I've been involved with the IATA since I was 18 years old. That's when I became a student senator and really found a passion for serving the profession. And it wasn't until about 2017 that I became involved with governmental affairs. I was very much involved with the IATA through other committees and other service opportunities within it, but it really wasn't until 2017 when I took over. And so it's hard to believe that we're in 2025, but it's been a found passion of mine. And so in 2020, I had the opportunity to become the chair for District 4 at the National Athletic Training Association level. And so I also have that role. And so that's where I'm able to work with Ohio and Michigan and to be able to collaborate with them and just in a little bit different way than I have in the past to really help not only advocate for Indiana, but for our region. And I found that to be particularly helpful because our legislators in Indiana, they really are looking at our surrounding states. We're not always the leaders in things, but if Michigan's doing it or Ohio's doing it, then I would say more often than not, we'll follow through. So I've just been able to gain a lot more knowledge in that role. And I always like to give the disclaimer today. I'm not an attorney. I don't play one on TV. And so any advice or anything I talk about today, I don't want that to be construed as legal advice. And also, I'm going to talk I think I'm going to hopefully represent the IATA quite well today, but nothing I'm going to say today is going to supersede what has been previously published through the IATA and doesn't necessarily reflect the views of the Executive Council or the association. But again, I really am excited to talk with you all today and to give you some context about what goes on in legislative governmental affairs and in the State House, and really just help unpack what seems like this really big omnibus committee that many people, as soon as I say governmental affairs, their eyes glaze over. So no, it's really fun, and there's lots of good things.
Yeah, governmental affairs can be seem daunting when you first look at it, especially when you're new to legislative, trying to understand some of those things, and even just going on the Indiana General Assembly website and looking at all the bills and the hundreds of bills that you can scroll through. There's just tons to unpack there, and that's what they get to do as legislators is make all these bills and hopefully the good ones and things that we need to help our communities and the state of Indiana to go through to better our state. And there's a lot of things happening at the General Assembly this year. It's a budget year, so that's extremely important for our state. Education, Medicaid, there's all kinds of stuff happening at the State House. That's extremely important, and they get to do it in a short, very short time span. So things move fast, and things change on a dime, very much so. And so, Lucas, just talk a little bit about the Indiana General Assembly, a little bit about, kind of their process. Very short. Obviously, we could talk days about what they do and what they get to do. So, but just kind of a general synopsis of them at the Indiana General Assembly.
Absolutely. And this is where I try to keep it very brief, even in my head. We have long session every other year. We have a short session every other year. And so with this year currently, like you were talking about, Daniel, this is the big year. This is where we have a changeover in administration. And so with the elections, there's just a lot of unknown right now in the state house. And so the last several weeks has really been a push of how this new administration, how are they going to be handling things different than what Governor Holcomb has done? And so, um, with our particular legislator, they are going to be done here about another, I think it's another 6 weeks or so. We're about halfway through the process, and that's why things can go 0 to 90 so quickly. And so I'll talk even more about how the speed of which they work, how that affects us as an association. But it's a I would say similar to a lot of states, but different than some others.
Yeah, and each state has their own uniqueness to their own state house, and obviously we say the word politics, but that's very much so on how things play. And we'll talk a little bit about more about that with some bills and things that we're going to be talking specifically about today. And we're going to be talking about a couple of bills that really affect athletic trainers. Specifically, obviously, there's other bills, and depending on your place of work setting, whether it's work comp, prior authorizations, I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that's happening. Medicaid. There's all kinds of stuff that's always happening, but some specific things that would affect probably a large majority of the athletic trainers practicing in the state of Indiana. One thing I think we can jump on and say right before we talk about some of these bills is obviously we as the IATA and athletic trainers, we're really good at what we do as athletic trainers, providing musculoskeletal care, emergency care, all the great things that we know how to do. And that's why we also need great people to work with us. And so, Lucas, just talk a little bit about the courting group and our lobbyists, and because we need good partners on our side to help us in this process.
Oh my gosh, I will tell you, I think that the reason why Indiana is one of, and I would argue, the best state in the entire country to practice athletic training is because the IATA has always been very innovative and always forward thinking. And so as we move forward and we pay as an association the courting group to be our association management firm. And there are lots of people I have talked to for years that do not understand why do we pay all of this money for these services. And we are fortunate because the courting group also offers lobbying services. And so, depending on if we have active legislation or not, we pay a different fee. And so, together, the courting group really helps to keep us forward thinking, forward moving. They represent several other healthcare professions. And so, they're in the State House daily. Lou, our lobbyist, has been working with us um, really since we've gained licensure back in the early 90s. And so, why I, as a chair, and why we as an association do a lot of the things, or I would say everything that we do in governmental affairs, is because they're our leader. And so, there's been people that have reached out to me recently that have said, like, why didn't we communicate with the membership sooner about, like, for example, House Bill 1185? Well, it's really because Lou, our lobbyist, is the one that has a sense of when we do all the things. So when do we write all the way from the beginning? When do we start to draft a bill? When do we as an association start to look at what do we want that next session to look like? But this is something that I didn't really understand, Daniel, was the fact that we can want to do all those things and we can get ahead and work in the summertime and early in the fall. But if we don't find a bill sponsor, it doesn't go anywhere. And that's where Lou has been so helpful, is to find that right bill sponsor. and with Bartels, who's the bill sponsor for 1185, very significant that we needed him to be reelected. We needed to make sure that we found someone that was as passionate about this bill, and that's where the courting group and Lou has been helpful, is to help find the advocates for us. And that's also where every single day, I would say nearly from early into November into December. That's where we're doing a lot of the prep work, but things go very quickly into being drafted. And then when we introduce it into the committee, that's also where the courting group and Lou specifically, that's where he's there daily. And as things are shifting, he's constantly trying to help keep our ship stable, if you will, trying to keep us moving forward. And so that's where the courting group also helps with our legislative updates. And so the reason why you get those legislative updates in early January versus sooner is because so much can change in such a little amount of time. They really are the ones that help keep us going and help track these bills for us. And I also think it's important to note that even though you do get those legislative updates that are brought to you from the courting group, they're not an exhaustive list, because just like you were talking about, Daniel, there are so many bills that get forward. The courting group really helped to try to narrow down what are the bills that we think are the most specific for athletic trainers. And there's always a bill or two in there that I think we could argue should have been on there, but that's where we really trust Lou, because I will also say, as a general member, that's a lot of information, and in those updates, we don't want to go too overboard too. And so every single part of the legislative process, they are in direction of, but of course that they listen to us, and as we have feedback for them, there's a lot of consultation with that. But and there's a lot of trust that we have with one another because we've been working with them, I think, nearly 30 years at this point.
Yeah, yeah, great people to have on our side, the courting group, and having Lou as our lobbyist. And I remember even, when obviously IATA has been around for 40 years, and preparing and doing a little bit of the 40th. I remember a story somebody was talking about how they went to the state house with another athletic trainer as leaders of the IATA and trying to get things forward, and they just didn't know where to go. They were just like, "We're at the state house, and what do we do, and how do we move forward?" And everything I think has really worked well for the IATA over these years of getting us from where we started as an organization. Pinky Newell and everybody that was like pushing, like, let's start the IATA because licensure was the big thing. And then once we obtained it, we just continue to grow. And like you're talking about, Lucas, we are a leader in the athletic training community. And so, but obviously having Lou and having the courting group is important. And so I just want to take this time now for everybody that's listening. If you live in Indiana and you're not a member of the IATA, please consider it. If you're an NATA member, that also includes your district and your state dues. But if you're not a member, I would highly suggest becoming a member NATA, or if you don't want to go that route, you can just be a specific IATA only member. And because the reason I say that is because of so much of this money gets funneled into the legislative process. And at the end of the day, we do these things to better our profession, but we all know why we do it. We do it because we want to help the patients and student athletes that we get to care for every single day and improve what they're doing and provide them better lives. And so that's why we do what we do as an association from an IATA standpoint. So I just want to throw that out there. So
And I think it's so critical, because I wanted to say this today. I think about those dollars every single day. Why I try to respond as quickly as I can, and I've you can be on lots of different committees, especially in academia. It seems like there's constantly, but I just want to assure everyone that this is my top priority every single day, because I know how critical it is that we move us forward. And so those dollars are more impactful than you could ever know, because they really are things that without those funds, we're not going to be able to move forward, at least on our own. We would have to really rely on other lobbyists and to be able to make those connections in other ways. And I can at least say for myself, I, as an athletic trainer, 3 degrees in athletic training, I have no background in any of this, and it would just take me a lifetime to get what I would say, at a very affordable rate, are able to pay for because of your dues.
Absolutely. Well, Lucas, let's just jump right into some bills. I know people are dying to hear about some of these bills. So I want to start with one of the bills, which is Senate Bill 350, Senate Bill 350, which is automated external defibrillator requirements. So this bill specifically, kind of just as an overview for everyone before we kind of discuss it a little bit. Basically, it provides certain funding provided to local board of health that may be used to provide automated defibrillators to school corporations, charter schools, and state accredited and non-public schools. And it revises the definition of venue-specific emergency action plans for sudden cardiac arrest and revises the requirements of the plan, requires the Department of Education to develop a plan for certain schools and provide support for this plan, and if requested by the school, and also requires the Department of Education to conduct a statewide survey of school corporations concerning the development of plans as well as AEDs. And so, kind of a quick overview there, but one of the things that really jumped out to me was about funding, getting funding from local board of health to use to provide AEDs. So, Lucas, I'll kind of just let you kind of jump into this and kind of where you want to break that down or some important things about Senate Bill 350. And
Yeah, I'm really thankful that with this specific bill, it's pretty straightforward. Um, there's a lot of opportunity, I think, that we have to get not only AEDs in our secondary schools, or just our schools in general, but what's really frustrating is that this was testified earlier this week to really try to help drive this and to help get this in the bill. It's that when you have student athlete like we had a couple of years ago, that they died 10 feet away from an AED that was not ever applied. So it's not just about the funding for the AEDs, but to really make sure that we have those emergency action plans and that they're routinely rehearsed. Because if we look at, and that's what we'll go into the next bill, if we know that so many of our schools don't have athletic trainers, it's really critical that we don't just have the equipment, but we have the knowledge of how to use that equipment. And so that's where this bill really comes in a unified way. And it seems like it's going to be something that it moved forward, and I think it has a very good chance of moving forward. Do you want to talk about that other bill that is looking like it might be comparable with it? And
yeah, very, very relatable. This other bill is Senate Bill 500, Senate Bill 500, which is cardiac arrest action plans. I'll kind of read a little bit about this one, but basically it requires a school corporation with at least one employee to develop a venue-specific emergency action plan for sudden cardiac arrest in consultation with EMS providers for athletic activities and extracurricular activities. It also requires the Department of Education to disseminate guidelines and information sheets, to schools to help them with this process. And then it also talks about it basically abuses existing law that authorizes a school corporation or nonprofit a school corporation to apply for an Indiana secured school matching grant to purchase an automated AED, or obviously that's what automated stands for, right? But so basically, really what this does is say, hey, like let's develop these plans, and then also talking about providing some funding for a matching grant program for AEDs.
yeah, and so I think that's something that thankfully not just the IATA, but there's lots of stakeholders in Indiana that see this as something that's of value. And so this is one of those that, again, because we have Lou and we don't necessarily need to apply any additional funds to help get that going, but to really help make sure that if the bill authors, if they needed anyone specifically to help testify, athletic trainers have been made available if that was something of interest. They had plenty of other people that they were able to get to testify. But I think that's where you're going to see every year there's going to be similar bills that are brought forward. But I think that with just there's the recent push, I think that both of these have a pretty um, um, high likelihood that it's going to get delivered. And so those athletic trainers, when those funds become available, I'm committed to making sure my fingers are crossed that it's going to get passed. And so that's where um, I'll I'll try to do my best to work with Lou and figure out how can we disseminate that to the membership so we can look at how do we help those different athletic trainers and different school officials to be able to access that, because I think that's the one piece is to get it you know funded and to get this access, but then to remind people of how to get that. So you can expect some additional follow-up information as the session ends and as that goes into law.
Yeah, and I think a little bit, Lucas, we're speaking to the choir, to athletic trainers and those in the sports medicine community about we know the value of emergency action plans and AEDs, but I think it was important to talk about these bills because of all the other groups that are seeing the value in this. It's not just the IATA or athletic trainers that are helping push this bill forward. There's a lot of stakeholders and a lot of people and legislators understanding the value in this, and not just at those athletic events, but extracurricular activities, marching bands always, throw out to me extremely important that they have the right equipment and necessary things to deal with, whether it be a first aid or into this emergency situations. But even in the school day, I mean, there needs to be accessible things for teachers to be able to start the process and get EMS there ASAP and administrators to know this information. So having action plans, having an AED, we know that as athletic trainers, we've been doing that for years. But I think this is important to know, hey, as athletic trainers, your schools are going to start asking some questions about where your AEDs are, and hopefully you have those venue specific plans and all those information. That way you can work with the school board. And I think with the funding, if you need another AED, it's never a bad idea to always have a portable AED with you. Obviously, we have some stations that, depending on your school situation and funding, but this provides extra funding to get extra AEDs. But having those venues, like you said, Lucas, we got to have people that know how to use it. You
Right.
know, there's athletic trainers and other people that can use it, but also having the AEDs accessible is also important. So there's a lot of things flowing, and we know that as athletic trainers. But I think it was important to mention these bills today.
Absolutely. And this is what I'd also say is that something that I want our members to understand a couple of things. So one, our legislators are moms, dad, grandma, grandpas, they're working professionals. They generally understand the need for things like this, especially after it's brought to their attention. But one of the things that you can do as a high school athletic trainer, or really this applies to all athletic trainers, but I'll specifically talk with these two bills with a high school athletic trainer or the middle school athletic trainer, invite those representatives to come tour your high school. Like that cannot I can't undertone that enough of how important it is that you get to know our legislators, because the school oftentimes in these communities, right, that's a really big deal. Even if it's like where I was, it was a 3A school in Mount Vernon. Like even if you might consider yourself small, you're not small, because to those local communities, that is the hub for so much activity, right? That's where the civilization heart is. And so to be able to invite these legislators so that they understand who athletic trainers are, and if there are needs such as the AD, let them know about that so that they can get really excited and knowledgeable at the same time. And that's where that co-authorship looks like. And if you look at the Senate Bill 350, there are several co-authors that are on there, and that really that stems from there are several people that are coming together that all agree that this is a big deal. So, something to keep in mind, regardless of, if you want to do it during a football season or basketball, I think there's never a bad time to bring them in, but it's something that you might not always think about. And that's how you can go into the General Assembly website to find who your legislator is. You can even find their contact information. And so it's actually pretty simple to be able to contact your legislator and invite them to the school.
Yep, and their staff is obviously it's a crazy time of the year just because they're working really hard for us Hoosiers. But I think their staff, anytime that I've called up there and said, "Hey, I have a question about this," or "Hey, like, can I have a meeting with Senator whoever?" Their staff is like, "Okay, let me see what I can do." And so not only is the staff, I mean, you have the staff, but then you also have the senators and the representatives. But I think we talk about athletic training being a small knit community. I think once you start when you just look at Indiana as a whole, while there's a lot of people, when you look at the big picture, there's a lot of people, but really, we're only probably two or three people away from knowing, our state representatives, and there's connections within your own
Absolutely.
community to be able to do that. And so, they're whether you're like you said, they all have professions, they all do things. There's different things, but I think it's important to know that there's always that connection, and they want to hear from you. And I think that's the other thing that most people, I think, in general, don't understand is that your constituent of that representative, they want to know what's going on. How can I help you? Because that's part of their role, is to help, provide support to their constituents in in the area of Indiana. I think it's extremely important. And while we look at a lot of things in politics and government, and we can, go days and days about complaining about stuff, when you really look at it from the state house perspective and you see what's going on and you see the changes that actually happen, you would be extremely impressed about what's happening day in and day out there, and all the wonderful people
Absolutely.
you get to interact with, and not just the representatives, but all government employees that work so hard, to provide so much great stuff to Hoosier families and individuals, and us as athletic trainers as well. We're part of that mix.
Absolutely. Yeah. I actually have a really quick fun story of was at a basketball game, and where I was sitting, because it was a pretty big game, I actually was able to meet our representative because she was there, and her sister was the former volleyball coach and PE teacher that was there. And I actually got to meet her at the State House when we were at Advocacy Day a couple of years ago for the IATA. So she was right there, and that was before I was in this governmental affairs. And I just wish that I would have said, "Hey, can I take you a tour of my clinic? Can I talk to you about a couple of things that I think would be really impactful and helpful?" So they come to our schools naturally. So even if you don't invite them, might be something to have it to think about. If you were to run into them and they were to, have a few moments to talk to you, maybe have a couple of talking points of how that might be helpful. And so I think the AEDs is one of those perfect things to talk about. Especially if there's more opportunity that you can have to have additional ones. That's just one example. I think that applies to all these different things that we can think about. But I definitely was not expecting them to be there, and I thought it was really cool when I was able to actually see her in her job, because she looked very different. It's like they go from very casual to their professional life just like we all do. So
Yep, yep. Well, and I think that just talks about the value right there. We talk about in athletic training. It was like, man, we wish people understood what we do and how we do it, and all the behind the scenes things that we take care of. That iceberg effect of there's a lot on the surface that people, I mean, underneath, right, that don't see that and what we're doing. And I think that's a perfect opportunity to let people know, and be your own advocate for yourself, but also an advocate for the entire profession. And so I want to jump right in to this next bill, because I think this is extremely important. It may take a little bit of time here, but it is House Bill 1185, House Bill 1185. The bill is just titled athletic trainer, so that should stand out to us as a profession. But the bill itself establishes a rural athletic training support program to address the shortage of healthcare providers in rural communities by providing grants to athletic trainers committed to working for schools located in rural communities. It also establishes the Rural Athletic Training Support Fund, requires the Indiana Department of Health, in consultation with the Indiana State Office of Rural Health, to develop criteria to award grants for the fund for allowable expenses. So when I saw that bill, I was like, wow, this is pretty cool. Interesting to see what this might provide for our profession and those types of things. And so, Lucas, if you could just start, with this bill. I know IATA was in some conversations about things. So can you talk a little bit, just maybe start about, obviously that was kind of the overview, but start about the origin of
absolutely.
kind of roll right into the next thing.
So originally, after we were able to get the Practice Act updated in one go, which is unheard of. And again, I go back to the courting group and Lou specifically of how skilled he was to be able to get that Practice Act updated, and to be able to really get the bulk of what we were wanting in one go. It really led us to what's our next steps. And so that's where we as an association, and particularly with the executive council, really looking at what is the next thing we want to do. And so we have very closely been looking at legislation for uh, heat illness, but specifically for wet bulb globe temperature, because we know that that's a much more accurate way of measuring and really looking at, so many things. I could go down the rabbit hole of all things with heat safety, but that's where the origin was. And so we wanted to look at a youth safety bill. And so that's where the courting group helped set up a meeting between some of the members of the EC, Becky, myself, um, and the courting group and the ICHA lobbyist and the ICHA commissioners to be able to discuss next steps regarding this health safety bill, because we want to be able to work with our coaches, right? We as the IATA see the ICHA as a really critical partner, just as we see anyone within healthcare, that we want to work together. We do not want to legislate at them, we want to legislate with them. And so, as we were going back and forth and talking about the challenges that they were seeing of us being able to implement this bill, with especially when it came to the wet bulb globe temperature, they didn't disagree with us. And I felt, as I was in that conversation, I didn't feel resistance. I felt anything far from it, of just the support. But we really started talking about how, listen, they said, listen, Lucas, you don't have enough athletic trainers, particularly in the rural parts of the state, to be able to implement this. So we could have this, we could do all these things, but we don't have enough people that we feel like are trained and can be significantly, impactful in these moments. And so that's where we started talking about this rural athletic training bill. And so um, there was a lot of behind the scenes work that we did. And so it really wasn't until November, or I'd say September, October, November, that's when we started talking about this. And so we as an association started talking about this. And there's a lot of behind the scenes that we were working with Lou, to really try to figure out, how do we get that problem? How do we get that into a bill and something that is actually going to pass, something that will truly be impactful um, in years ahead? And so that's where we worked to identify a potential author. With the election being where it was, that was going to be critical for us, because we might have a couple of people that are in mind, but if they didn't get elected, then they couldn't be advocates for us, and it was all a moot point. And so we had to be careful, because um, we didn't want to get ourselves too far ahead. So that's why we didn't inform the membership as a whole early on, because there was a lot that shifted between these early conversations to where this bill landed in early January. And so that's where, once we were able to find an author with Bartels, that's where it originally was going to, as it was read, it went to the Public Health Committee, but it does look like it's getting ready to go to the Ways and Means Committee. And so it's important to understand with this bill, and I have my notes here on this one, Daniel, because I want to make sure that the membership understands. This legislation does not provide grants. It only establishes the fund, and the IATA does not have a specific call, that we were having to action right away, because we wanted to be able to see where it was going to go. And so we took this as a first year. This was um, our plan all along, was to just really test the waters. So I have a couple of notes with this too, is that um, we know that there's a critical need for athletic trainers in this area. And there's a couple of different ways that we know that we could go about trying to do this. And so this bill also helped come from other states that have had similar legislation. So I'll use the great state of Alabama, where they specifically have stipends for athletic trainers that work in rural communities, and they used the threshold was 50,000 residents or fewer. And so in Indiana, by us using that specific mark, 50,000, well, that helped about 53% of the secondary schools in Indiana met that criteria. So there's been a lot of confusion. I've talked on LinkedIn, I've talked different platforms about this. we talked a lot back and forth about what that number would be. Because if we went smaller, sure, people would think that's more rural, so to speak, but it just didn't get the impact that we knew that it needed in order to be able to get to that next step of really making sure that we can do all the youth safety bills, like the one that we were talking about with Senate Bill 350. Like we know that's great, but it's even better when you have an athletic trainer that's on site. And so um, we knew that we had to start somewhere, and so I talked about Alabama. They went in one direction, and truthfully, that's where I myself wanted to take us. I wanted to give that additional stipend. $7,500 is what they do in Alabama, and so there are other states that they do similar stipends. But that's where we looked at Iowa, where they do a similar type, where if you agree to work for a certain number of years in rural communities, they'll pay off your loans. And so that's where we thought we would have the highest chance of passing, is that it really encourages students. You have to go to a school in Indiana. And so, right, like UND, great
But
program. So, so
if you're a good person that does your research, you would
right.
not go wrong with any of our academic programs.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so, I think that was part of this, is that we knew that our governor, our current governor, is very pro keeping people in Indiana, and so are we, right? Like we want all of our students, we want them to come from all over the country because we know we have great programs. We know, and so I use UIndy as that example, as Daniel's wearing that, but it's like, let's get them here, but then let's keep them here, and let's make working in rural high school attractive. Because what I know myself is that when I moved to Mount Vernon, Indiana, I left a piece of my heart there. I mean, I truthfully, like, I I felt so a part of that community. I only wish I could have talk my wife into moving there. But I know that if we can get people there, and we know that with the loans, being as high as what they are, that could have been a win-win for the state. That could have been a win-win for that individual. And so, if I know we're going to get this, I feel very positive that one way or another we're going to get this bill passed. But it's step one is to get them there. Then the next step is going to be to show how many athletic trainers that we're able to fill these empty vacancies, right? That if you look anywhere, especially in the southern part of the state, really, as you look at like Bloomington South, there's so many openings that I keep seeing in the north western part of the state, even in Fort Wayne, where I live, that there are so many of these vacancies. I was hoping that once we could see that the athletic trainers were there, and particularly, focused on those that still have loans, which we know are likely our younger generation. Then, if we can get them happy there, can we give them a boost of some additional stipend, like what they've done in these other states? For example, with Alabama, to really keep those athletic trainers there, because that's where I want to make sure that we're not just gonna we're not just gonna do like a bait and switch, get them there, and then you have this high level of turnover. That's the issue. Like when I was in grad school, every couple of years, this rural community in Appalachia, they had a new athletic trainer, and it was good, but but you can't. It's not the same, right? You can't have every 10 years to have 8 athletic trainers that have went through there. That's not the continuity of care. Um, so that's where our call of action we had about a week or so ago came from the NATA to really help to do this letter writing campaign. And so, depending on when you're listening to this, there might still be time. And so, please, if you're an IATA member, you have received this email, this call to action. And so this is our opportunity to be able to help bring attention to this. So every time a legislator has an email, there's a tally. And so our goal with this was not necessarily to get it past the first go. And that's really frustrating, I think, for some members, as I've even talked to. They're like, what? Don't you just bring this forward and you're done? Listen, I made it look really great. The IATA, we made it look really, really easy with the Practice Act update. But I need you all to understand that is not how this process typically works. And so, what we were really trying to do ultimately was to truly try to test the waters and to see where it is. We knew that we had this new governor coming in. So there's lots of things that are in shift right now. That's what this year is particularly for. Now, could we get very lucky, and am I optimistic that we're going to be able to push this thing through? But it's, we're not necessarily, and again, I'm going back to my notes because I want to accurately reflect this. This legislation doesn't provide grants; it only establishes the funds. And so that's where we know that we have some additional work that we're likely going to have to do. And so we're going to take the lessons that we're learning right now to really beef up what we're working on next year. And so that's where you can expect additional information coming to you from the as a member, and that's where you can start to see likely more communication early on in the fall, and that's where we're going to build that support. But that's what, Daniel, I don't think people fully understand is why don't you have the communication first, then you do, and then you celebrate the quick victory? Like what they don't, and I don't mean that flippantly. I think it's because um, that's logical. That logically would make sense that the membership, that we have a very solid platform every single year, that we have a solid plan, and that we're able to go in there and execute it. And with some bills, like the Practice Act, that was non-negotiable. That was 100% IATA led. We knew exactly we want that bill to say. We knew that there was years that we were working. There were several presidents and several executive councils that like were talking about this. And I think there was just a lot of um, false information that was in there. It was just inaccurate information. And so that's where we had rallying at the state house, and there was just a lot of work that we did for that. Um, and that's exactly what this bill, and with the essence of this bill, we're starting again. We're starting to build our momentum, and this is how we build our momentum. So happy to answer additional questions, but I hope that any member that's out there that perhaps was frustrated, that didn't understand why did communication not come sooner, I can just assure you that uh, every single movement that we made was in consultation with the courting group and specifically Lou, and that's where we have used the same lobbyist for so long, and we have had our success because of him. And so I trust him, and that's where, again, going back to being members, is that I believe that this will be successful. I too wish that it was quicker, but I know that we'll get there. We just have to continue to be able to fight forward. So happy to answer additional questions and go from that. But that gives you a really good solid overview of where did that originate and where are we currently.
And for those, obviously, you received an email, or you can actually just go to the IATA social media platforms. And our great communication chair, Meg Wilson, posted that information, and you can just click right on that link, and it takes you to that platform to fill out. Pretty simple to do, but it's just really saying, "Hey, look, I want this. I support this as a not only as an athletic trainer, but you're really voicing your opinion and say, hey, as a citizen and as a Hoosier here in the state of Indiana, this is extremely important to me, and obviously our rural communities need athletic trainers, and this is part of that step process." I think that's kind of interesting what you said as far as, how when you're trying to, we know as athletic trainers what we want. Like we know like what the gold standard is. We know what all these policies and things that we want to put into place. But a lot of times what we have to do is we have to take sometimes baby steps. Sometimes we can run, sometimes we got to sprint, but sometimes we got to be slow and methodical. And I always kind of think back because I'm younger, and I'll hold on to being younger for a long time. But some of our veteran athletic trainers, they know what it means to be persistent when it comes to this. I mean, you can talk to Larry Leverance and David Craig, and them talking about starting the association. And I know David Craig is like, yeah, I thought we were just going to start the association and get our licensure and be done and move forward. Like that was the goal. That's what we needed at that time in athletic training history in our state. But it didn't work that way, and it took multiple years to get to some type of legislation, to get even type of any regulation, and then we finally got licensure. And so I think for people to understand, especially understanding history is extremely important. We talk about that, generally when we talk about history, but I think just athletic training history and specifically the state of Indiana athletic training is that sometimes things take some time and sometimes things move fast and we can move forward on it. But what we're trying to do at the end of the day is we're trying to better the lives of athletic trainers. And as most importantly, we're trying to better the patient care that we provide to the people that need it most. And this is part of that bill, people that really need critical healthcare providers in their rural parts of the state of Indiana. So I wanted to say that because I think that's extremely important to understand and know that things take time, patience is key, and persistence is key. And we know that as athletic trainers to just keep grinding away. When things are get hard, you just got to keep grinding away at it. And this is no different when it becomes from a legislative standpoint.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you that's where when I first came into this role, we didn't do any. We knew the Practice Act, that was what it was all. And so I I myself am reminding myself of exactly what you said of like, what do you mean it's being taken to from public health to the Ways Means Committee? What do you mean? Like, what, this is public health. This is the definition. And so understanding that um, it's going to it's going to eventually get us where we need to be. But I think um, the next step where we need to be is that we need to not only look at this bill, but I think that as we go into the next session, is it okay if I can I start talking about just like some forward progress too, just off this bill? So this is going to be something that we're working on in the background. And again, I'd love to see it even if not this year, next year. But that's gonna be our long-term play. But as we're looking at the success of the Senate Bill 350 and similar bills, that's where you can also expect that we're looking at other partners to try to get at some of these other things like the cold whirlpool tub, as we look at really as you look at the Corey Stringer Institute, as they've come in and they've done the different Tufts meetings as Indiana did a couple of years ago. We know that there's a lot of opportunity for that. And so I'm speaking as an individual here, not this is not IATA specific, but like I hope that as we're doing some of these big things here, that we can work on some of these smaller things that will also have giant impacts too. And so that's where, as you look at a state, as you look at really effective legislation, is that we're not just going to do one piece and move it forward. It's really about how do we do a variety of different things that have different ways that they impact the community, so that ultimately we're able to bring the success. But it's going to be critical that we as an association um, learn a lot from this specific General Assembly session, and we're going to be taking lots of notes. And so that's what all the way from May, June, July. That's where we're going to be working behind the scenes to really figure out what ultimately was successful, who were the authors that helped make that successful, and what were the tactics that they used. And so we're going to take that knowledge to be able to move that forward. And so we're not just going to be rural athletic training. That's not going to be the only thing that's in the future ahead of us. But I hope that people feel like they have a better context of why that now, out of all the things that we're prioritizing. Because again, as a high school athletic trainer, um, if I wasn't working in the rural part of the state, I don't know if I would have necessarily said, "Ooh, that's exactly where I want to be." I think I would have looked at the bills such as the AD bill and other things like that. I would have likely had that as a higher priority. So hopefully everyone can see why are we doing this step. So it's going to help us lead to that next step.
Yeah, as you were saying that, it really made me think about, if you're ever, I don't know how many people do puzzles anymore. I don't do tons of puzzles, but back in the day when I used to do puzzles, you would always do the perimeter first, because those are the easy pieces to identify, right? Find the straight edges, and then you can start kind of putting that together. And then once you kind of get that all the way around that border. And then it seems like once the pieces kind of start flowing and you look at the picture and you kind of put it together. And I think that's really how some of this works as again, we know what we want that picture to look like. And our culture and our society is ever changing. So sometimes that picture changes. But I think the important thing is that we build this perimeter in a not in a good way, right? But like a perimeter is like, hey, like this is what our foundation is, and then we can kind of build on top of that. And I think one of the things when you were saying this with when we start getting some of these bills to go through and we continue to have Obviously, we have a lot of good friends at the State House. For those that don't know, we have a
Sure
lot of
do. We sure do. We appreciate how so many of the members of the General Assembly have been actively supporting us. And as we looked at the Practice Act update, it was a unanimous positive vote. So we very much appreciate that, regardless of what party they are, that we know that athletic trainers are well respected, and that is because of the continued work of every single athletic trainer in the state. And that is an ongoing thing, going back to what we were talking about previously, that we are only where we are because of how impactful every single athletic trainer has been. And so that's where I know that we have a really solid base of that. And I think it's important to continue to mention that, because not every state has what we have.
yeah, yeah, very, very fortunate, and obviously we have these great friends and partners at the State House from from our senators and representatives. Obviously, the coordinating group's part of that, and Lou. But at the same time, as it makes sense. It makes it. We all know that as athletic trainers, it makes sense to have health and safety for those that participate in sport in our secondary schools. It makes sense to have AEDs in our school systems, right? Like sometimes we think, yeah, this is easy common knowledge, but sometimes we need to be educating people. And that's why we have friends, because they're like, yeah, what you guys do is important work. You're valued. You're important to the healthcare system here in the state of Indiana. And so I think that's why we have partners, is because we're good at what we do, and we know how to build relationships as athletic trainers, and so we're good at a lot of things as athletic trainers and to provide and so when we get to the State House, and it's so easy to be able to do some of that relationship building because we're so good at it. But so I think there's a lot to the puzzle. There's a lot to build upon, and I think as athletic trainers, even if a bill doesn't affect you, I know we're talking a lot about secondary school rule, secondary schools, specifically, with House Bill 1185. But I think as athletic trainers, we all have to, we all need to support each other, because when we can advance in one area, we all advance. When school safety becomes priority at a secondary school, then when they get to the university level, they start going, well, why is there only two athletic trainers for 1,000 athletes? That's not appropriate, right? And so I think we start seeing positive changes when people recognize the value of athletic trainers and see the need, and people really need the need of it. And we know that, when we specifically just look at athletics in general in our traditional settings. But I think you see that kind of starting from the kind of the bottom up approach. I think when we can start there and say, hey, let's provide good quality healthcare and have laws and regulations part of that, it all trickles up. But I think also things trickle down as well. And so we're all have to work together in this, no matter where you work, whether you're working in a physician practice, industrial setting, whatever the case may be. We're all in this together. And at the end of the day, like I keep saying, it's not because we want to push ourselves forward and look at us as athletic trainers and all these other things, and while we want a lot of different things. But at the end of the day, we do what we do, and we got into healthcare to help take care of people, and care about people. And so I think at the end of the day, that's what we're trying to do. And if we keep that focus and this is my opinion, but if we keep that focus on healthcare and taking care of people, all these other things fall into place, because people realize we're genuine and we're not just doing it to be selfish.
Absolutely, and that's what yeah, I think that's something that I'm particularly proud of. I think as you look at really the legislation that we have brought forward, and really I would say in our lifetime, Daniel, as we're both young and hip still, right? It's like, but it's I think that we continually work to try to not only service our profession, but it's always been about the bigger picture. And I think that's where we get to have successful legislation, is because we're not just trying to advance just ourselves. We're constantly putting our arms around the state and trying to bring us forward. And that's what I'm committed to in this role, is that we will continue to work together as a state, and that we will continue to try to work as a whole, as opposed to the fraction of people. That's where I think if we have limited dollars for advocacy, we have to make the largest impact possible.
Absolutely. And ways that we can, obviously, we need funds, because things aren't free in the world. Everybody knows that. Things are expensive, But one of the ways that we do that is a membership is important because that provides quality. And not only, I mean, not your membership dollars just doesn't go, and a lot of athletic trainers already know this information. You've been preached to about it before, but I want to let people know membership dollars are not doing just governmental affairs. There's a lot of resources and self things and a lot of good stuff that you get from being a member of the IATA. One of the other things, and Lucas, if you could touch just a little bit on it, is the LAT pack. Can you talk a little bit about that and ways that people can support, governmental affairs more specifically with the LAT pack?
Absolutely. And so, as the chair of the LAT Pack, I think it's important that you understand that we do not commonly come and collect funds. Like that is not something that you have probably come accustomed to. Is every year at the annual meeting that we're asking for money. It's because truthfully, we've been really in a great place where we've had some good funds, but also because we've just with our dues of having the coordinating group that we've been able to make a lot of successful, impactful relationships. But the LAT pack really comes in when we know that we specifically have sponsors, like for example with the representative with Bartels. It's like we know that we need to be able to sometimes to help support them in their reelection campaigns, for example, so that we can make sure that we have those advocates in the state house. And this is also something that I wish I understood when I was earlier in my career, and just I wish I understood that having someone that's seasoned that understands the process, it's really powerful. That doesn't mean you shouldn't vote for someone new that in if you really feel strongly about them, but that is something that we have found as an association to be successful is to lean on the members of the General Assembly, particularly those that have had several years there, and to use their expertise and their influence that they have. And so that's where you can expect that this next year, starting this next year, there is going to be some more focus on that. That's one of my goals is to be able to increase that. And so I fully expect that we will not need hundreds of thousands of dollars as an association to move us forward, but we have used some money recently to be able to help in some small but yet impactful ways, and it's something that a little has been going a long way. So that's where that lap pack is, and that's why we do it. It's truly a purposeful mechanism to keep our association moving forward behind the scenes and to keep people that love our profession and can speak eloquently to it to other members of the General Assembly that maybe need to be educated.
But if you have $100,000 just kind of laying around and you want to have this conversation, I'm sure Lucas would be happy to talk to you about ways we utilize that money in a positive fashion.
We sure do. We sure do. But that's where I don't know how many people in the pack would say this or in a position like mine, but it's like really what I found is $25 actually really goes a long way. And so that's something that's very very small amount of money in relation to the hundreds of thousands that maybe you see other lobbyists and other associations maybe pour into it. I'm grateful that $25 is still $25, a couple of cups of coffee, but I'm glad that we can rest assured that we don't have to put in quite as much money as maybe others to be able to get the similar type of impact.
Yep. And I know there's information on the website under the Governmental Affairs Committee page about if you want to send a check, you can do that. That goes to the coordinating group to help process that to the Black Pack. There's also a PayPal link as well, and that's also included in the weekly legislative updates. So ways, a couple different means there to be able to donate to the Lat Pack. And obviously, and I'm going to say this, I think Lucas would approve. If you have questions about the Lat Pack, if you have questions about how to donate, please reach Lucas or the IATA to get more information.
Absolutely. And one of the things I look forward to after we get out of session here, I'm looking forward to finding fun ways that we can raise the money. So a straight contribution is great, but I understand that doing something else could be really helpful. So I don't know if a golf outing is in our future or not. That's what the IT used to do for years. But if you have an idea on something that we can do, or really anything that sparked curiosity, you can also find my contact information on the IATA website. I'd love to talk offline and really figure out what are some things that we can do to have some good fun socialization, but also to be able to make a positive impact towards the lap pack. So more details to follow.
Yeah, I was thinking karaoke night, and I would love to see Lucas up there singing a song. I don't know what
Let's
song
do it.
I
Only
can,
if you do it with me.
yeah, deal. If people donate money and we can raise money and move our profession forward and help our patients and our clients, then I would do it. So, well, Lucas, anything specific about these bills? Anything about the legislative process? IAT? I know we covered a lot of information.
Yeah.
Anything else you wanted to share from that end of things?
Most important thing that I want you all to take away from this is that um, I am not just a person behind the website. I'm not just like a name, if you will. Um, that I want to assure you that every single day that we're working behind the scenes on your behalf as an athletic trainer, that there is not um, there's not a single day that I personally feel like we have wasted. But I also understand that there's going to be times where we're doing something perhaps that you don't understand. And if you want to be educated on the process and why we're doing what we're doing, please reach out to me. I have found that phone calls are much more powerful than emails. And so maybe an email is how we get that started. But please, let's have a conversation. And if you have ideas or you're like, hey, I really want to see us grow in this area, that's where I'd love to have that conversation. And that's something else. And I'm also young and learning in this role, and so please know that uh, all feedback is appreciated. And one of the things that I think I've learned the most throughout this last couple of weeks has been how quickly this process can go. And so I'm really committed to try to find other ways other than just this podcast of finding more ways to educate the membership. And so if you have questions, and I'm collecting these like almost to create this FAQ, but also if you have ideas on ways that I can help better educate the membership on this process, I'm all ears because I understand that this process can be confusing and it very much can feel backwards. Um, I could see how quickly people would be like, why are you doing that? And so I I don't want you to be frustrated. I want you to be a very happy, continued member of IATA, not just for legislative affairs, like you're saying, Daniel, but because of all the great resources. But I also just like I want to make sure that you know that there are lots of resources that are out there too. And sometimes what I found is that people contact me with a question, and then I'll get them in contact with these resources that either we have at the state level or at the NATA level. And one of those resources that I wanted to share with you all today, if you don't already, the legal opinions. So we have our most recent legal opinion from our practice update. It's in the members only section of the IATA website. And there's been several members that have reached out to me, I would say within the last 6 months or so. Those dollars that we have from being an association member went towards that the legal opinion being written, but I have already seen it make positive impacts to be able to help advocate for athletic trainers to work in a variety of different settings and to be able to really, keep us so that we're able to work in all the areas that we have expanded to. Because it's not just important for us to expand to these roles, but I think to make sure that we're growing in those areas and that we're able to make sure that other stakeholders understand that yes, we can work there, that we have this ability to work there. And again, none of that was legal advice, but the legal opinion is legal. There is some more teeth to that than just the we have a great practice act.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, anybody that's listening, if you have questions about the IATA, questions about if you're an athletic trainer in the state of Indiana, want to know a little more about the IATA, or if you're a member and you want some information, don't hesitate to reach out to anybody on the executive council and the team and anybody's contact information that's out there on the website. My experience being a part of the board for 4 years was people are engaged and willing to do that. And I think we also have an engaged membership as well. and want to see us succeed and move forward. And so don't hesitate to reach out, and also don't hesitate to get involved. It's important that we all work together to keep moving the needle forward, no matter the area that we're working in. There are certain areas, whether it be, honors and awards, or it may be, athletic training month that's coming up soon, and, there's so many avenues that we can all work together, because we all have our strengths as athletic trainers, and you might find your little niche within the IATA to get involved and be engaged.
That's exactly right. And maybe, dare I say, you'll fall in love with governmental affairs, or something that you never thought that you would enjoy as much as what I have. But the one thing I'll also go off of that, Daniel, is just also remember that as a member, you're always welcome to join our executive council calls. If you're ever just curious of what we do and what goes on during our time together, join. It's something that I think you'll be surprised by, how much we typically get done during a time together. And I think that you'll see that there's a lot of people that care deeply about our profession. And so it's really, there's a lot that goes behind the scenes, and that could be a really great place for you just to peep in just a little bit.
Absolutely. Well, before I let you go, I do have a fun question for you. I got to end everything on a good note here. But my question to you, Lucas, is if you could be an animal, what animal would you be and why?
I would be, I go back and forth on this answer. I've been preparing for like feels like 2 weeks on this, but I think I would be a pterodactyl. Okay, because I'm really into dinosaurs right now. Slash, my toddler's really into dinosaurs, and that is his favorite dinosaur. And so I'd be super cool, and I could fly. So I'm gonna go prehistoric with that answer.
Nice. Well, Lucas, I do appreciate you coming on and spending a good amount of time here on the podcast and talking about legislative and what's happening at the 2025 Indiana General Assembly. And obviously, tons of things happening and pieces moving, and it goes fast. But we hope that obviously these are stepping stones for some things, and getting things moving in the right direction for our profession and for those that serve. So again, thank you, Lucas, for coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much, Daniel, and thank you for all that you do for our association.
Yeah. And thank you, everybody, for joining in, and hope you see you on the next episode. Everybody take care. Thank you for tuning in to the Indiana Athletic Trainers Association podcast. We appreciate you taking time to listen and look forward to you joining us again on the next episode. To find out more about the IATA or to get in touch with us, you can visit our website or reach out via social media.